Well, thank you everyone for joining us for our Wednesday webinar. We're going to start the new year off with some personal growth. Our speaker this time is fellow alumni Randy Anderson with E3 Professional Trainers. Today we're going to be discussing how to improve your personal productivity to increase your professional value for career growth and advancement. So take it away, Randy.
All right. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be with everyone today, and Happy New Year. I know that that still has the feel to it. I heard a conversation yesterday about when do you quit wishing somebody a Happy New Year, when you get sad or when you feel like it's not new anymore. But Happy New Year to you, and hope you had a great holiday season and a very meaningful Christmas, and glad to have you today. Just a little background on me. I am a tech grad. I graduated in 90. When I first got to tech, I was an ag comm major when I first got here in the late 80s. There were 13 of us. And so I know AgCom has grown considerably since that time, and have kind of been able to watch that. I live here in Lubbock, and so I'm able to kind of see things up close. And wherever you are today, if you're in Lubbock, I don't know how many of you who are are in Lubbock today, but it's a typical Lubbock day, especially in January. The wind is blowing so hard I can hear it outside right now. But never a bad day to live in Lubbock, never a bad day to be in Texas. And I think some folks on the East Coast may be reminded of that today. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of start today by setting the mindset, and as we go into this, and if you were on a minute or so before we started, you heard me say I'm very informal. I prefer to be much more conversational. Zoom doesn't allow for that very easily, but it is what it is, and we will work through that and deal with that. But I will say, I really prefer, as I go through a presentation, a virtual presentation, if you've got questions along the way, I'd love it if you would just ask those in the chat box. I can see the Q&A box, but it just makes it a little bit easier for me if you can do that in the chat box. And I will see that, and I will, I'll either opt to answer it at the time or answer it at the end. But a lot of times those questions come in kind of a timely fashion to the content we're talking about at that time. So if we wait another 30 minutes, it may be hard to draw context from it or put it in the right framing there. So feel free to add things in the chat box as we go along. And as I say, I will answer those as we come to a proper time. And it may be that I even say to you, hey, we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So if you'll hold off for a minute. But I just want to make sure that you know that everybody's muted except for Tracy and I. And so you won't be able to actually voice your questions. But I have always in the past, and I'm willing to do this today, stayed on until everyone's questions were answered, even if it goes past the announced time. So if somebody has a question that goes on and on, but you've got a lunch appointment and you need to jump off, I completely understand that, but I won't be the first one off. I'll wait around and answer whatever questions that you have, and see if I can help you. I will say anytime, so I specialize in workplace productivity and employee engagement. I go all over the nation. I think I'm up to 26 or 27 states that I've spoken in at this point. Had several more on the calendar before COVID came along. And so trying to decide whether I can kind of Zoom webinar for somebody in Montana as speaking in Montana or not. But nonetheless, I go all over the nation talking about productivity. And when I talk about time management, when I talk about personal productivity, challenges in that area, in fact, I did a 3-hour presentation on it yesterday. That's one of those things that we can talk about for 2 or 3 days and never cover it all. All the different aspects of what personal productivity looks like, the challenges that you face. We've got lots of attendees today. I could ask each one of you, and everybody's going to have a different set of challenges or a different set of hurdles that you have to overcome. Some of that is going to be from other people. Some of that is going to be because of the industry that you work in or the organization for whom you work. And some of that's just going to be the way that we live life, conduct ourselves, the personal disciplines that we have, our ability to focus and prioritize and organize and all those things. And so in 45 minutes or less, it's really difficult for us to saturate this or to adequately address any of it. But what I've tried to do, I think I've got 6 total is what I ended up with. I just tried to boil this down to some things that I really think productivity wise will make you more valuable to your organization, whatever your organization is. And so as you look at what that means to you, the first question I want to ask you is, when you look at the contribution that you're making to your organization, the contribution you make is what determines your value. And anyone who is spending money on anything is probably looking at that for what is my return on investment. So when you look at the return on investment you have, within your organization, they're looking at what it costs to hire you, what it costs to find you, what it costs to hire you, what it costs to train you, what it costs to onboard you, and what it costs to keep you. And, as we look at that, all of those things should be an investment, not an expenditure, because you're returning more to your organization than what it's costing them to have you there or to have gotten you there. And so as you look at this, I want to ask you several questions. Number one, what do you do? Or what do you do for, or what do you mean to your organization? In other words, what's the role you're playing? What is your product that you're cranking out? Even if you're not making a widget, what is your product? Is it communication? Is it sales? Is it account development? Is it scientific research? Is it some form of management where you're overseeing a team that's working on something? What do you do for, or what do you mean to your organization? Here's a tough question. How would your organization be different had you never been there? In other words, when you look at the contribution you're making, the value that you're bringing, how would your organization be different if you had never gotten there? And you've always got to be able to answer that question to know where your organization sees value in you. Is to know what void would be left if I wasn't here. What do you offer to your organization or to your customers, to your clients, that would be difficult to replace? But most specifically within your organization, if you were to leave this week, would it be difficult to replace you because what you do so well, or because you do so many different things and you're in a varied, an extremely varied job description or to-do list? And then the last thing, what do you offer your customers or clients that they can't get from someone else? So when we look at our value, our personal professional value, that's one of those things that you really have to look at and say, well, what's my measuring stick going to be? Well, those questions that I just gave you, those 4 or 5 questions that I just gave you, are a great place to start. So, when you look at, and I've been posed with the question, what advice would you have for somebody that is only getting into the professional workplace very late? Regardless of when you start, and this is one of the things that I was going to say later, but this question kind of goes to this at this point, is there's always a place for anyone who brings value. Now, it's conceivable that your place may not be where you are today. It's conceivable that may change, whether you're getting into the workplace at 22 years old or whether you're getting into it at 32, 42, 52 because of life circumstances. You've got to look for ways to bring value. And that's going to come through your skills, through your knowledge, through your experience, and through the way that you do your work, whether that's working by yourself or with someone else. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes as well. When we look at a starting point, so let's go to that point of the question. When we look at a starting point, I think the expectation for what a new employee is going to do or a new team member is going to do is based a lot, number one, on the hirers. That's a weird way to say that, but an RERS, hirers, perception on life. Are they an optimist? Are they a pessimist? Are they generally a skeptic? Are they a cynic? Whatever the case may be. But it's also going to be based on the conversations you had and how you presented yourself through interviewing, through application, through resume, through things like that, as well as the references that you gave them. So as you get off, obviously the big goal is get out of the gate quickly. I've got a 23-year-old young professional son. He's actually in between jobs right now. He spent the last year in New York and he's moving back. And one of the things I said to him when he first got started, especially if you're new to a job, new to a career, new to an industry, you don't have to have a home run, but you definitely want to make sure the first one is a hit. You want to use a baseball analogy, you want to get a hit. You don't want to strike out. You don't want to pop out. You don't want to ground out. You want to get a hit and at least get on base. And then from that point on, it gets easier because then I can build off of the experience and the success that I've had. So as we look at this, let's jump in and I appreciate the question, Kyle. Thank you for posing that. And again, anybody else who wants to put something in the chat box, I'll keep my eye on that as we go along here. So let's get started on what I think is going to help you most. And the first thing I think that you've got to really just embed in your brain for all the way through your career, whether you're new, whether you've been there for a long time, whether you're at a transition point, in your career, is to focus on the right things. There's a lot of times when we focus on what's most pressing instead of what's most important. And what's pressing comes in the form of who has sent me the most emails, who has left me the most voicemails, who keeps showing up at my door, who keeps calling meetings, things like that. When in reality, those things may not be what's most important. And so when we look at most important, that's sometimes hard to judge. What's most important may be what's at the top of your boss's priority list. And I'm smart enough to understand we have to acclimate to that. We have to understand, and I'm hesitant to use the word acquiesce, but we've got to conform around that to some degree, because that's how they deem, uh, what's going to happen is from their priority list, unless you can convince them that there is something else. Depending on the industry that you're in, if you're in a for-profit business, obviously one of the things you're going to look at is what's most profitable. And that may not be what's most pressing. What's most profitable may be a long-term project that's hard to get started on. But what is most pressing, what's most important, just means it's at the top of somebody else's stack. It just rose to the top of their stack, and they're up against a deadline, and they were supposed to have this done before the end of the year. And here now, all of a sudden, they've come back, and it's a high priority for them because they missed it, before the end of the year. And so you kind of have to. I mean, you got to bend with that a little bit. I mean, there's got to be some give and take there. But I typically want to try to focus on what's most profitable. And if you're in a nonprofit, most profitable may be what's going to bring the greatest level of service to your constituents, to your users, whoever those may be. What's going to be most valuable to your stakeholders? What's going to be most valuable to your shareholders, whatever forms shares come in? It may not be purchased stock, but it may be people who are volunteers or people who are benefiting from those services. And when you look at your priorities, I want you to think about this. Like, especially if you're taking notes, and you've got a spot, on your sheet of paper, flip it over on the back or whatever, write out the word priorities. Just write that down. Priorities. All right. Now let's play the game we played when we were kids, when how many words can we make from the word? Well, the first one you come to is prior. And that's the base. That's the root of that. So what has to come prior to everything else? Well, is it your family, or is it your career? Is it a marriage, or is it your kids? Is it your health, or is it productivity? I'm going to stay late. I'm going to cut back on sleep. I'm going to stay up late tonight and work on this. I'm going to go to the office on the weekends. I'm not going to take time to work out. I'm going to skip lunch. What comes prior to everything else? And you've got to look, and you've got to say, if I'm not focused on the right priorities, then I'm not bringing the greatest value. However, if I'm focused on someone else's priorities, then that's going to mean my job does not bring value or fulfillment to my life. And it's going to make you less inclined to be 100% engaged in your job, giving your best creativity, giving your best energy, giving your best effort all the time. I would say, as you're setting goals, or as you're creating goals, you're looking at what you're going to do, you want to try to connect your personal goals, your personal to-do list, your personal agenda to organizational key objectives. Make sure that you're contributing to something that the organization has deemed important for the entire organization. That may be a strategic plan. That may be a growth goal where they want to have X number of locations, or X number of dollars, or X number of members, whatever that finish line is, whatever that landmark, that milestone that they're looking for is. And make sure you base your strategies and tactics, strategies being key areas you're going to work in, tactics being things you do every day. Make sure you gear those toward helping to achieve those key objectives, and they will see great value in there. And then that will dictate your to-do list for the day, on any given day. If your job doesn't allow you to utilize your strengths, and it doesn't bring you fulfillment, then it may be time to consider a new job. Now, I'm not saying if you're, 5 weeks in, 6 weeks in, and obviously during COVID, obviously at a time of transition in our country where we're not really sure what to expect come January the 21st, we're not really sure what to expect by this afternoon right now. But when you look at that, if it's not, I don't know that this is the best time to be out looking for a job. But I also know you only get one trip around in life. And so if your job is not allowing you to use the strengths that you have, the gifts you have, the things that really bring fulfillment to you, it may be time to look at a different job, at a different organization, or even in a different industry. And that's a hard realization to come to, but it may be time to consider that. Could you find a job at your current place of employment or somewhere else that allows you to narrow the things that you're responsible for and go very deep in an area that is a strength for you or that does bring you great fulfillment. So in other words, instead of being a generalist and I'm an entry level employee, can I move into a position? Could I look for an internal promotion or an internal move that would allow me to narrow that to the things that I feel like I do best and enjoy doing the most? So that's number one, focus on the right things. All right. The second thing we're going to look at is you've got to budget your time and stick to your budget. And typically, when I talk about time, when I do time management presentations, when I do my full blown, 5-6 hour seminar on that, when I talk about the difference in time management versus time budgeting, the term time budgeting a lot of times draws blank stares. Many people have never even heard that term before, that expression before. Those who have heard of it kind of know what it is, but not many of them have one or use one. And so what I mean by this, in the same way that you budget your dollars at your house, we know how much we're spending on a house payment or rent. We know how much we're spending on a car payment. We know how much insurance is going to be. We can generally guess about how much grocery and fuel is going to be and things like that. And we've got dollars set aside for discretionary money, for vacation fund, for going out to the movies, for eating out, for paying tuition for a kid. I've got a kid in college right now. We allocate dollars to those certain things. Well, what about allocating your time in that same fashion? So could you allot X amount of time for certain tasks that you've got? Consider it this way. What percent of your week is a certain part of your job? What percent of your week does it merit being given that time? Is it 10% of your week? Well, then that would be a half a day. That'd be 4 hours that you're going to give to that. And we've got to look and we've got to decide, well, I can't give more than 40 hours if I don't want to spend evenings at the office or taking work home with me or coming in the mornings early, staying on the weekends. I've got to allocate that time, and then I've got to compress the tasks into the blocks of time that I've allotted, rather than saying, I'm going to work on this till I'm done, however much time it takes. If that means I don't have dinner with my family, if that means that I'm not able to go to my kid's basketball game, or I'm again, giving up personal time. Giving up personal time, we're going to talk about this in just a second. Giving up personal time and being at the office more does not necessarily mean you're more valuable to your organization. It means you're there more, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're bringing greater value. And that's what we're trying to focus on today, is how can we bring greater value? Look at the hours when you're at your best. So for me, that's generally between about 11 and 3. It's when I'm really at my best. If I can schedule important phone calls at that time, or meetings that I have at that time, anytime I can do training kind of midday, that's where my brain works best. I'm not great first thing in the morning. By the end of the day, I'm generally kind of getting tired, lulling a little bit, kind of going into a dip before you get into the evening. Some people are morning people, and they need to do those tasks at 8 o'clock, 7:30 in the morning, whatever it may be. So, if you're a night owl, hate to tell you, but you're not going to be able to set up a bunch of phone conferences, at 10 o'clock at night. You may be able to write your best emails while you're lying in bed, but the rest of the world's not going to work around a night owl like that unless you're dealing with Asia. Whenever possible, stack your day. In other words, if I'm going to be out of my office for one meeting, well, I'm going to try to put every meeting that I'm out of my office back to back to back. Number one, it helps me to get the first meeting finished, so I get out of there on time and we don't sit around talking about the tech game last night or whatever the case may be. We're on task, we're moving forward, and then I've got a reason that I need to leave in 45 minutes because I've got to be across town in 15 minutes. And I've got appointments at 9, 10, 11 o'clock. I've got appointments at 1:30, 2:30, 3:30, 4:30. And I'm trying to stack my day to where I create those back to back to back opportunities to keep me on track, to keep me on task. And then the hope is that I can free up another part of my day. And that's another big strategy that I like to talk about in my time management seminar. Don't look at your day as 5-day blocks. Look at them as 10 half-day blocks. It's not likely you can block off Thursday, but you might be able to protect Thursday afternoon. No meetings, no phone appointments, anything like that, so that I can have 4 hours where I can sit at my desk and just crank through my list of priorities. I can crank through my to-do list, or I can crank through my stack that I've got on my desk that's been building up since before Christmas. Going about it and looking at your week in 10 half-day blocks, that really sounds simplistic, I know, but that really has revolutionized my efficiency. And as I've talked to people and they've come back to me later, they're like, wow, that really did change everything about the way I plan my time. So again, trying to protect at least 1 or 2 half-day blocks per week for personal productivity time will allow you to get more done and focus on those right things as we go through that. I would also say, there may be times, and let me bring this up and show you. This is an example of a time budget. This is just kind of a hypothetical time budget that I put together a long time ago that includes several things that may be a reality for you. And as you look at this, you'll see I blend my personal and my work schedule together. So, if I don't work out at 6 o'clock in the morning, it generally doesn't happen. I would try to do some personal reading first thing in the morning, make sure grab breakfast, get dressed, ready to go, take kid to school if I'm in town and can do that. Then I jump into my day. So I put this on the premise of starting your day at 8:30. You'll see a communication block. I'm going to check email. I'm going to check voicemail first thing when I come in. And, I'm going to, see which ones have to be responded to right now versus which ones could wait until a little bit later in the morning, or could wait until I get through knocking out the junk emails out of my box or whatever. Okay. Then let's look at Monday. I move into what I call daily or weekly tasks. You may have a job where you do kind of the same thing every day. I check a certain report that dictates what I'm doing for the rest of the morning. I've got to make customer calls, whatever that may be. I'm going to jump into those daily and weekly tasks and try to knock those out as early in the day as possible and get the regimented part of my day behind me. When you look in the afternoon on Monday, you may want to set appointments and one-on-ones at a certain time. You may want to flip that because you're better in the morning. So I'm going to do my daily, weekly tasks in the afternoon. Now let's go to Tuesday. And I'm not saying do these on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I'm giving you different examples on different days of how your day might lay out. On Tuesday, let's say you've got to make X number of customer calls, client calls, member calls, stakeholder calls, whatever those may be. I want to try to allot blocks of time for that. So again, I check my voicemail when I first come in. Well, one of those voicemails may be a customer, a client, a shareholder, whoever, or even a vendor, possibly a vendor, who is trying to make contact with you. Well, I could move that into a customer contact block rather than returning that voicemail during a communication block. Okay. And so I've left Tuesday for customer contact. If you're in a job where that's the primary duty you have, then that's going to take up the big bulk of your time. Now let's look at Wednesday. Wednesday is where most people who look at this and go, wow, I can't really plan my day like that. Wednesday is a day for you. On my example here. So you could almost just forget about the times on the left side if you're going to do it the way I've got Wednesday. I'm going to come in, I'm going to check my email, I'm going to check my voicemail, I'm going to return what I have to. And then when I get to 9 o'clock and I go into that priority one block, I'm going to my to-do list, whether you keep it in iCal, whether you keep it in Outlook, whether you keep it in to me, a great app to use on your phone is Reminders. And it's on iPhone and Android. Very easy to use. It's very easy to segment things and to put things in certain piles and to keep it really organized. You can bring up intrusive alarms where it reminds me to call so-and-so. You can set alarms by where you are geographically so that the next time you're running by somebody's place, if you just want to drop in, it'll say, next time I'm going past here, send me a reminder. And oh yeah, I haven't checked in with so-and-so in 2 or 3 months. I'm just going to stop in and do a customer touch call is what I would call it. That priority one, some days you may start and priority one may take you 10 minutes and priority two may take you 3 minutes and priority three may take you 25 minutes and priority four may take you 12 minutes. Other days you may start on priority number one and it may take you all morning. And it comes time you look up at 11 o'clock, can't believe it's already 11 o'clock. I'm gonna have another communication block to make sure no important emails have come in that people need a response by lunch, or I've not gotten a voicemail that I need to return immediately. I'm going to go to lunch and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to go right back to my priority one list at 2 o'clock. And it may be that I go back to the same thing I was working on this morning because I didn't complete that task. So it's driven by what's at the top of the stack, what's at the top of the priority list. Again, you'll see Thursday is kind of set up as previous days, but then let's look at Friday. Friday, you may want to have a time blocked out to work on long-term projects. So you'll see that I've got that between 9 and 11 on Friday morning. I've also got a block. And so I'm going to look at that one and I'm going to say, I'm going to try to not ever roll over that block. But I've also got an hour set aside for it on Friday afternoons. I've got an hour set aside on Friday afternoons for a one-to-one with my supervisor. I go to a network lunch where I'm meeting with people who are, we're just connecting and talking to people on Tuesdays at noon. I don't have to go to those. But if I'm going to do that, it's going to have to be Tuesday at lunch. Maybe you, or a partner of your organization provides something and they've contracted somebody like me who every Thursday at 9 o'clock they do an online free webinar training for workplace productivity. I don't have to attend, but if I'm going to attend, it has to be Thursday morning at 9 o'clock. So that's where I've got the conference call blocked out there. Look on Tuesday morning at 8:30. There may be a staff meeting or a team meeting that you have to go to every single week. Non-negotiable, got to be there. And you just want to set up your time budget to where it can help you to make sure you make time for all aspects of your job, not just for whoever's sending the most emails, leaving the most voicemails, or yelling the loudest. And so again, you don't spend money to your desire to have. You spend money based on how much money is in. If you put it on a credit card, you're going to have to pay later. And you're doing that on the premise that there's going to be extra money laying around later, which there probably won't be. Well, you're not going to have extra time laying around later either. So here, that is a way that you can do that. Now, I will tell you, there's multiple things on here. This one being the most important one, not most important, but the one that makes the most sense for me to tell you. On my website, which is e3professionaltrainers.com. It's long, but it's easy. e3professionaltrainers.com. You can download a blank time grid like this. You can download an instruction sheet that's kind of what I just talked about, how to set one up. You're welcome to call me and contact me if you have questions about it. Email me or whatever. I'd be glad to talk you through it after the call is over today, or after the webinar is over today, sometime in the next few days. But to get these off my way, it's free. You don't have to sign up for anything. You just download it, print it off, and you're good and you're rolling. If you want to try to set that up, I will tell you, it's like dieting. It's like exercise. It's new and it's hard, and you're going to be sore for a few days. You're going to be hungry for a few days. Well, if you try to do this, there's going to be some challenges to making it a reality, because we've created an American workplace that is based on crisis management. I wait till everything is due. I work on it right then. Well, I do my best work at the last minute. How do you know? You've probably been doing everything at the last minute since you were in college. And most of us are like that. And I'm guilty of it too. So I'm just saying, it is a tough transition to try to shift over into this. But again, I'm happy to, if you want to email me or call me, I'd be glad to try to talk with you more specifically about what your challenges are and see if we can help you find one that'll work for you. Okay. All right. For the second time, I'm going to keep rolling. The next thing I think that it's important for you to do if you're going to bring value to your organization is to really be good at collaborating, working with the people who are on your team and collaborating with them. And this sounds like a fundamental suggestion, but why aren't we better at this? Because in many organizations, we're not very good at this. I continue to hear how the younger generation in the workplace is very communal, but they don't want to go to, especially during this Zoom age, they'll have Zoom offered and you can come to the conference room and watch it, or you can sit in your own cubicle. Well, instead of walking down the hall and sitting with their coworkers, they'll stay in their cubicle with their earbuds on. And, communal means different things to different people. And I know that we like to be a part of a community, but does that look like a Facebook community, a Twitter community, a Snapchat, Instagram community? Does that look like a LinkedIn community, or does that look like we do things together outside of work as well as at work? Why don't we do a better job of it? I mean, I think there's several things. One, I think it's our pride. I want to be the one who gets the credit. I want to do it my way. I'm afraid to ask for help because they might realize I'm not as good at my job as I thought I was, or as they thought I was. Well, here's what I typically find. If you're not good at something, everybody else knows you're not good at it. They just think you don't know you're not good at it. So by asking for help, it's showing a self-realization and a self-awareness that, hey, this is not one of my strong points. I need to get help. I need to get input. I need to get collaboration from other people. Again, I think some people just don't want to share the credit for things going well, so they make life unduly hard on themselves so they can get all the credit. It's a pretty lonely way to live. I think some people just don't play well in the sandbox. They like being isolated. They would like to have autonomy. They'd like to work on their own. COVID hadn't driven them crazy because they like working in their own home. Their kids are gone to school. They can sit here by themselves. They can wear their pajamas. They can listen to their music, whatever it is. This may not play well in the sandbox. But I think there's some other, I'm hesitant to say organization, but people within organizations who just don't know how to collaborate very well. I mean, what that means to them is they sit down, they have one think tank session in a conference room, and they never talk about it with each other again. And, I think, when we look at this, collaboration is not only thinking together, it's working together. It's celebrating and commiserating together if things don't go well. But there are some people, and their thought is, I don't just want to get the credit, but I'm convinced my way is right. I don't want to do it somebody else's way. Well, the thing is, in many instances, other people can most likely give you some ideas to make your life easier if possible. And so, if you can collaborate with the people on your team and you can find a way to make sure that you're drawing their best ideas and they're using your best ideas, then it's likely that their ideas plus your ideas are going to produce a better idea than you would have had on your own. And as much as somebody doesn't want to have to be in that community situation or have to be in that conference room, sitting around the table, team meeting, I've got to answer for my actions in front of everyone else. When you begin to look at how you can collaborate with other people, my challenge for you is what can you give and what might be your take from it. In other words, what might benefit you in that. If your organization doesn't encourage that, then that may be hard for you. But I can tell you, well, let me ask you this before I make that statement to you. How would you rate collaboration within your organization? If you were going to give it a grade, what would you say is most important on the things that day in, day out? Sorry, I'm sure you saw me do that. The mailman was waving at me outside asking if he could ring the doorbell. The age of COVID and what we deal with, right? How would you grade that within your team? How would you grade that within your department? How would you grade that within your whole organization? And, what would it take for you to become a catalyst for collaboration within your team? Personal influence is not dependent on positional authority. And so you can become that catalyst for it, even if your team doesn't always seem to look for ways to collaborate. That doesn't mean that you can't be a catalyst for that. So I would just challenge you to be a person who influences others by giving and being willing to ask for help. And then it becomes a two-way street and it becomes a cycle. It perpetuates itself. Okay. All right, let's go to the next one. You've got to remember, you've got to realize, you've got to keep in the front of your mind that results matter more than effort. Trying hard doesn't count as much as it once did. Back I'm early 50s, my parents, my grandparents, people would go to a job and they'd stay there 30, 35, 40 years. They're a loyal employee. They're there every day. They never call in sick. Well, being a person who's at your desk every day is not the measuring stick anymore for what is really bringing value to your organization. And so it's about the results that you're producing. So as I said earlier, in response to the question I was asked, there's always a place for someone who brings value to their organization. Now, again, that organization may go away, but someone will recognize that value that you bring and they'll hire you. There's always a market for great employees. I don't care how bad the economy is. There's always a market for great employees. The better the results you produce, the greater value you'll bring. But the better results you produce, the less necessary it becomes to publicize that. In other words, the better value you bring, the better results you produce, you're not going to have to tell people. They're going to know that. They're going to see that. They're going to recognize that. And quite often, the more you publicize it yourself, the less value people perceive in that. Well, I get tired of Randy always talking about what he's done. Well, what if I just sit back and let them see what I've done and bring value in that way? So look at it this way, as far as results versus effort, what keeps you busy? So like on a given day, if I were to follow you around, if I were to come and sit up by your desk and watch you, if I were to sit over and look over the top of your cubicle, whatever it may be, what keeps you busy? How busy are you? I mean, are you allowing your work to expand to fill the time? Or are you having to work to compress your work to fit into the time so you don't have to stay late every evening, take work home with you? What part of your job is most notable or noticeable to or by others? What are they going to see most? Because there's a lot of things you do nobody sees. Nobody's necessarily checking to see if you're keeping up with your email. They just know you didn't respond to their email. And you may have knocked out 100 emails today, but if you didn't respond to them in a timely fashion, they're going to believe that that's, that you're not taking care of your business. And here's one thing I find everywhere I go. People generally hold this perspective. You don't look as busy as I feel. And so we don't have that mutual empathy to go, I don't know what's in their job. I don't know what they're battling. I don't know what they're up against. I don't know what they're required to do. But all I know is you don't look as busy as I feel. And so I'm convinced I'm working harder than you. Well, just because somebody looks busy, looks frantic, looks stressed out does not mean they're being super productive. Doesn't mean they're producing those kind of results. So you want to look at this from a perspective. This kind of can go in a timeline across your sheet, but you want to say inputs lead to outputs. Outputs create outcomes. Outcomes produce results. Input, output, outcomes, results. Input, I press the throttle in my car. I press the accelerator in my car. Okay. And I ask people, what's the result of that? The car moves forward. No, the output is that gas goes to the engine. The outcome is that the engine turns. The result is that the car moves forward. But we want to skip from input to results, when in reality, the input, checking email, doesn't keep you in business. But customer communication does, internal communication does, collaboration does, response time does, having information shared between teams, that keeps you, but that's an input, not a result. The result is better customer communication or customer retention, customer service, whatever the case may be there. All right, next, don't be afraid to back up in order to go forward. Don't be afraid to back up to go forward. One of the most difficult challenges that I see people face in personal productivity is to give up an old way of doing things. Well, I've always done it this way. This has always worked for me before. I've never had a problem in doing it this way. I've always started off this way. And I look at that and I think for some people, the longer they've done a task or a job or whatever the case may be there, the longer that has gone on, the harder it is to walk away from a daily habit, a daily system that you have in place, a daily regimen that you have. And when we look at that, if we do it that long, I think we can sometimes get lulled into the mindset that's the only way to do it. It's not just that I'm thinking that's the best way to do it. I begin to think that's the only way to do that. So every once in a while, in your job, in the various tasks of your job, in your parenting, in your marriage, in your family finances, in your personal health care, you're taking your diet, exercise, things like that, every once in a while, you need to step back and you need to say, is this still the best way? I'm not asking if it was the best way 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 8 years ago when you started. I'm just asking, is this still the best way for me to do this? Is there a better way? Is there a more efficient way? Is there an easier way? Is there a less expensive way? Do I need to do it at all anymore? There may be some, I go into some companies and they're trying to go paperless, and yet everybody's afraid to quit printing everything. And so you've got a soft copy and a hard copy of everything. Is this still the best way to do it? And that will help you to know if you can, back up and say, I'm going to relearn this. I'm going to figure out a new system. I'm going to spend 2 or 3 or 4 hours and create a template for this. Every time you use a form, somewhere back down the road, somebody had the wherewithal to say, you know what, I'm going to spend a few hours and create a template, an order form, an intake form, a receipt, whatever it is. And by doing that, they multiplied time later on. Back to the collaboration. When was the last time you discussed best practices with a coworker to see if perhaps they're doing a task that is similar to a task that you do, but they're doing it with a different methodology? And you may be able to steal best practices from them, best ideas from them. And again, be one who shares as well. Don't just be a taker only, be a giver as well. But to make sure that you're doing that in the best way. All right, so we're getting down relatively close to the end on time. Before I finish, I've got one more big one I want to give you, but I know that some people may have to jump off because of previous commitments or whatever. So I've got one more area I'm going to talk about. But before I do, I just want to reiterate one more time. If you've got a question, go ahead and type that into the chat box. And again, I know I've not touched on everything that we can talk about on personal productivity or professional value. I get that. I mean, I fully understand that, and there's no way I could do that in 45 minutes. But what I do hope is that I've given you to this point, I think 5, and I've got one more to go, strategies that can bring a direct result, very visible, pretty immediately to what you're doing in your job, to help you to become more valuable to your organization or to your clients or your customers or to your members or whoever those may be. and that you can take those away and begin to use them this afternoon. I try to always talk in practical terms, not theoretical, abstract terms, very practical, applicable terms. If you've looked at these and you're like, I just don't understand how you make that a reality. Well, I want to give you the opportunity to connect with me. And so if you've got a question, if you want to talk about this, if you want to hash out the time budgeting deal, I'd love the opportunity to connect with you. And so there's connection information for you. I will tell you, on Facebook and Twitter, we often put out an idea for the day, a thought of the day, a tip of the day, a question of the day. Occasionally I'll forward a video if I see a motivating or a thought-provoking video. I'm not going to waste your time telling you what I had for breakfast or what I'm wearing that day. That's not the way I use it. There in the middle where you see the E3 zine, you can also register not just for our E3 zine, but for our E3 Minutes for Life, which we put out, and actually I think one went out this morning. Our marketing department was putting out one this morning. That is just they usually come out on Wednesdays, and it's just about a 3-minute video that just kind of kickstart your day, just kind of in that middle part of the week, just kind of, and I shoot them all over the nation, usually in front of some landmark. I've shot several on the tech campus, but I've also shot them in New York City and in Chicago and Disney and Vegas and Austin and all over the place. And it's just kind of a, hey, how's your thinking? What are you doing to make your goals a reality? That kind of thing. And they're very quick and easy. And then there's my email and there's my phone number. If you want to give me a call or give me an email and try to figure out, how do I figure this out? How do I make this work? What can I do to bring this to my organization and make it a reality with them? Through further explanation from me, I'm happy to talk with you about that and email with you on that. So haven't seen any more questions pop up. So I'm going to go to my last point, and that is that you should finish what you start. Again, sounds very fundamental, but as I go around the nation and I work with every type of in every type of industry you can think of, every size of business you can think of, with people of all ages, all stages, all education, this is a real challenge for a lot of people, is finishing what they start. I mean, there's a lot of people who are good at starting things, but not many finish well. And that's the mark of somebody who truly brings great value, is they finish what they've started. If you tend to not finish well, and what I mean by that is your things are past deadline, maybe they're really not as thorough as you'd like for them to be. They're not as, they're not as accurate as maybe they should be. They're not as well thought out. They're not as well presented, whatever it may be. Or it may be that you end up a lot of times leaving fragmented things for somebody else to have to finish. And you excuse that away by saying, well, they don't mind doing that, or they've always done that. I say, well, it's your job. And so if you're not good at that, if you don't finish well, can you diagnose why? Well, I just, I don't want to be evaluated. That's for some people. I'm afraid when the project's over, I'm gonna get evaluated on that. Okay. I don't want to start something new. I'm very comfortable with what I've got now, and I don't want to start something new. When you look at how you're allocating your time, if you allocate it to all the projects you've got going, then you've got to look and say, okay, I'm going to complete this stage of the process by this date. It may be self-imposed deadlines, but you can hit those by that date. Have some accountability in place, have some incentives in place. I'm not going to go to lunch until I finish working on this report. I'm not going to leave for the day until I do this. I'm not going to have any screen time on Facebook, Twitter, whatever your drug of choice is there. I'm not going to have any screen time until I have done some personal reading to make myself smarter today. And then when you look at it, is there an effective consequence that you can have, such as the screen time, such as the not going home? To have rewards and consequences in place for both sides of that. There's a difference between perfectionism and procrastination. And sometimes we just don't finish because I'm just going to do just a little bit better. I want to do a little bit more. I just want to do this. That's not always going to make it more perfect. It's just going to make it take longer. Okay. So last question in the chat box that, and I'm still open to a question. Kyle asked, can I say the quote about personal influence again? Here's what I said before. Personal influence is not dependent on positional authority. In other words, I don't have to have a job title to begin to influence the people on my team in a positive way. And you can also influence them in a negative way. I will say that as well. I mean, I tend to sometimes focus on some negative things. I refer to myself as a realist leaning toward pessimism. And my wife says, no, you're just a pessimist trying to make yourself feel better. But on a day like today, I don't need to gripe about elections. I don't need to gripe about stalemate. I don't need to gripe about weather. I don't need to gripe about wind. I don't need to gripe about COVID. Everybody knows that stuff's going on. But to be a positive influence is not dependent on me being promoted to becoming a manager. or a supervisor or anything like that. I can have personal influence regardless of my positional authority if I do it correctly. And if I will do the things that we've talked about today, this is going to give you the opportunity to bring greater value, present greater value to your organization and to your end users, whoever those are, that's going to make you worth more and make you more valuable in the community. Okay. I show that I'm down to 1 minute. I'm out of information. So Tracy, again, thank you so much for the opportunity to present today. I really do mean it, that I'm open to a phone call or an email. So give me that. And, would love to talk with you about the challenges that you've got and see if I might be able to help you in some way. Even if I can help your organization, I'd welcome the chance to just have that exploratory conversation also. So Tracy, I don't know if I'm supposed to hang up or turn it back to you, but that's the end of my script there. So I'm done.
Awesome, Randy. This was excellent, and I really hope that we can do some future webinars with you and maybe drill down on some of these points and really kind of continue some of this professional growth stuff. So if there aren't any more questions, thank you all for attending. If you do have further questions, please feel free to reach out to me or Randy or both of us. Again, this is being recorded, so it's going to be included in next month's email to you guys so that you can refer back to this video and get some more information on here if you need to. So thank you all very much.